Letters to Romeo by Willeseas. Summary. When Marcus gifts Simon with an early honeymoon vacation to Florence, there was absolutely nothing likely to go wrong. Of course, if by nothing Simon means the downfall of his love life and sending letters to a stranger, desperate for any advice that could save his relationship. Or, where Wilhelm is Romeo, a secretive entity that helps lovesick people in his hometown by answering their letters. Wille keeps himself at an arm-length distance from involving personally in the stories he's confided to, until a curly-haired boy crosses his way and turns his world upside down from the very beginning. Chapter 1. Simon can and will be the one to ruin the mood. Summary. I thought it was a thing in Verona only, Simon babbled, mind going to his brief knowledge of Italy and something about the Juliet's secretaries answering the depressing love letters left on a famous wall. The blonde smirk just got larger. Yep, but that one you just said is for Juliet only, and it's been faithful to the Romeo and Juliet Shakespeare romance for decades now. Our wall is a bit newer. It started only a few years ago. She motions to her back where the letters stand, and no one knows who answers to them, if it's a single person or a whole crew like Juliet. Romeo can be any and everyone in Florence, really. I think that's the actual magic behind it all. Simon heard the tinkle of Marcus's keys before he even reached the door. His heart was pounding, and he immediately turned on his heels, the old notebook with his mom's handwriting left unread next to the oven as he waited for the door to be unlocked. A few seconds later, his fiancée made his arrival into their apartment, hands full of bags and sweaty, as if he was running for the past half an hour. Hey, love, Marcus exhaled rather than said, putting the bags to the corner of the entrance hall, and finally going full body into their home, closing the door by kicking it with his feet. He smiled excitingly, his green eyes becoming tiny. Hey, Simon grinned, releasing the glass bowl he's been holding up on the sink to cross the room until they were both face to face, and he wrapped his arms around Marcus. The other squeezed Simon tight, but not in the same way they used to hug every day. This hug was different, like there was something fresh in the air waiting to become Simon's knowledge too. Marcus lifted his head just enough so he could lean down and kiss Simon's mouth. Simon melted into the touch and let himself finally breathe properly, his heart stopping beating fast. He doesn't understand why he gets so much anxiety every single time his fiancée is about to get home. He thinks that, perhaps, the feeling is related to the adoreness he feels. Doesn't everyone who's got a partner get very excited about the prospect of seeing the love of their lives again by the end of the day? Simon stands by this mindset most of the time, and he tells himself his body reactions to Marcus do not matter, not really. What were you doing in the kitchen? Marcus whispered against his lips, giving them a quick kiss before tracing a wet line beginning on Simon's cheeks and going to his neck. I really missed you. I missed you too, Simon manages to say, closing his eyes. He forces himself to say something cohesive, despite the crescent heat inside his body. I was thinking about cooking us dinner for tonight. It would be a surprise, but you came home earlier and Marcus chuckled against Simon's jawline. What plate do you have in mind? Something Mama used to prepare for me and Sa. Simon stopped mid-sentence, just as Marcus suspended his lips from contacting his skin. His heart beating increased speed for a second time. I brought us some food, Marcus said, tone drier, though not moving from his closeness with Simon. From the restaurant. Are you sure that you want to cook dinner, I mean? Simon realized Marcus had some sort of dislike for his mom's plates a lot earlier in their relationship. He never asked about what was the matter with it, though, and Marcus also didn't seem particularly keen to share his thoughts. Instead, Simon just did what he thought was better. Avoided all the situations where Marcus could be faced with Linda's food. Throughout their boyfriend's years, Marcus would never stay to eat meals at the Erikssons' house in Bjerstad. When he'd get sick and Linda would insist on cooking Marcus something so he could recover faster, Simon would deny such care from her, unable to form any excuse that wouldn't hurt her feelings. Today, on the other hand, Simon was feeling kind of homesick. There was a wistful feeling knotting his stomach, making him miss his family all reunited. He would still see Sarah pretty often, since she now also lives in Stockholm after graduating college, but his mom remained in Bjärstad, and Simon hasn't been able to find time to see her in person for almost 3 months now. His life lately has been all about university, finding a good job, and his engagement with Marcus. These were all things that bring him joy, but Simon couldn't help but still feel like something is missing. Or even like there's something out of place and he can't quite put a finger on what precisely yet. He thought that maybe cooking some of his favorite Venezuelan food from his mom's recipe book would help him feel less nostalgic. Simon swallowed his unspoken warnings and opened his eyes. Back to reality. "What did you bring today?" Simon simply asked back. "Then I can see if it's still worth using my amazing cooking skills." And then joked, trying to light up the now cloudy atmosphere between them. Marcus laughed, but it wasn't enough to cover the discomfort dancing behind his voice. He took some distance and put on a smile on his face again to look at Simon. "I just love how you always understand me," he murmured. Simon smiled too, as genuinely as he always did. While Marcus unpacked the things he grabbed from the wooden floor and spread on the dining table, Simon closed his mom's recipe notebook with a sigh. "Later, Mama," he said to himself. And then went to his fiancée, finding out he had brought them some extra thin pasta with a stupidly expensive sauce and salmon, alongside a French-aged wine and a bottle of natural grape juice. Besides being the kind of meal the two have at least once a week, and it should have become their couple tradition at this point, Simon still mourns the times when Marcus would bring or make them more unique food. Not that everything is bad, not at all, since the family business Marcus works in, the Mogrens, is one of the best-rated restaurant companies in Sweden, and he's obviously been exposed to a lot of cuisines at a young age. But Simon doesn't say anything about it. He never does, mainly because Marcus seems so joyful with the things the way they are. He won't and can't be the one to ruin the mood. If Marcus is happy, Simon is happy too. They end up having a peculiar romantic dinner. Simon sat at the table across from Marcus, who'd grabbed candles from one of the kitchen drawers and lit them up, warming the apartment and creating shadows in all corners visible. It doesn't happen very often, Simon thought. On regular days, Marcus comes home so exhausted that he barely manages to take a shower, eat, or spend time with Simon to hear about his day. Simon supposes that it's only natural for a relationship to cool down and grow into stableness. Today, though, despite the strange reaction to a possible Venezuelan homemade meal moments earlier, Marcus is now almost giggling with excitement every time he opens his mouth, back with the same thrilled demeanor as before. Simon keeps his curiosity for himself until it almost explodes inside his chest. So, when Simon is discoursing about the fashion agency he presented his ideas and drawings hours ago in the afternoon to try for a job, he interrupts his own thoughts to ask, "But why are you so happy, honey? I could sense your bliss the second you set your foot home." Marcus's grin that's been present the whole dinner gets large, and he tangles his pasta around his fork before answering. Simon mimics his action and takes the food to his mouth, feeling anxious again as the sweet yet spicy sauce taste blooms on his tongue. "I've got something to tell you." Marcus gestures to their surroundings, the candles, crystal glasses, and plates, and I wanted a special environment to share the news. Simon went silent, waiting, looking at his fiancée expectantly. Marcus continued, "You know, we've agreed on getting married by the end of the summer. It's a beautiful period of the year, of course, but we won't have time afterwards, and we even agreed on skipping our honeymoon because of work and stuff." "Yeah." Simon nodded, not knowing where Marcus has his mind at. "And I really don't mind it. We could take a break and go on a trip or whatever anytime our schedules happen to match. But..." Was it possible for a smile to get this big? Simon came to the conclusion that yes, it is possible. All Marcus's teeth visible under the orange lightning. "My family likes to treat their employees right. Every start of summer and winter season, they organize some prize draws where a bunch of the people working for them are gifted with. There can be various bonuses, such as an increase in their monthly payment, some cinema tickets, domestic stuff like furniture." "Oh." Simon's eyes widened, seeing what was about to come. A smirk appeared on his face. "Oh my god, Marcus, did you win something?" Marcus mimicked Simon's amused expression. "Yes." I got a whole month's vacation to Florence. All included, and it's all already paid. 4 weeks in Italy, baby. Simon couldn't help but jaw dropping to the floor. His head started spinning, his emotions hurricaning inside his heart. Fake scenarios about lovely evenings with Marcus appeared in front of his eyes. At the same time, walks to museums, cobbled streets, and cozy moments in a small hotel room during hot days made his cheeks flush, and he wanted to cry. Simon has never left Sweden his whole life, and to get the chance to do so now, together with his future husband, and create a whole new lot of memories with him, it all sounded like almost too much. Marcus, Simon tried, but stopped for a while. At the same pace he was dwelling about comfy moments and cotton clouds, his mind traveled to what it meant that Marcus had gotten prized. Did the employees that work hard in the restaurant approve it? Marcus was the heir of their employers, his parents' own Mogrins. There's no way it went through well perceived. Simon almost brought the topic on, eager to know if this expensive opportunity shouldn't have gone to someone that really needed it instead, but he chose to don't at the last minute. He won't and can't be the one to kill the vibe. So you're saying we can actually have our honeymoon? If you consider a trip before our wedding happens as a honeymoon, then yes, that's exactly it. That's what I want to happen, Marcus explained. Simon felt paralyzed in awe, eyes wandering his fiancé's face, unbelieving what he just heard. Marcus took a sip of his wine. But I got to warn you, the vacation is originally settled for 4 people. Since it's all paid already, there can't be fewer people. So I thought about bringing 2 of my Mama and Sara are coming with us. Simon bumped the words out before even thinking through them. It wasn't a question. He wasn't asking for permission or for the other's opinion. It was his homesickness speaking, the urge to have his family in the same place, by his side again. Marcus gasped, a small trickle of tinned wine spilling through his lips. Don't you think a honeymoon together with your family would be kinda strange, love? Simon felt a fraction of a racing heart before answering convincingly. One with your friends would be just as strange, Marcus. It's been some time since I can't get to have my family present, and plus, I really think they deserve experiencing something fancy for at least once in their lives. We can still have time for ourselves, honey, you know that. Marcus did all but meet Simon's eyes for a beat. Simon hates how they're constantly subtle bickering around these topics. He doesn't like his fiancé's friends, and neither do Marcus sympathize with Simon's, and it even spreads out to his family. Since Hilashka, it's almost as if they can't manage to create a network of mutual relationships. Simon doesn't really care, as long as he and Marcus are in good terms. It doesn't mean that it doesn't bother him sometimes, though. And Marcus's friends aren't exactly the best, if Simon's being nice. Marcus seemed to give up whatever he was about to proclaim either way. With a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, he just nodded and took another sip of his wine, watching Simon through the rim of the glass. Anything you want, Sima, he said, to Simon's complete delight and thankfulness. I love you, Simon whispered, giggling hard, rising from his seat and circling the table until he was cupping Marcus's cheeks. I love you, he repeated, kissing him. I love you too, Marcus murmured in the middle of the kiss minutes later, their food completely forgotten by the time. And I'll surely love you more if we celebrate this honeymoon right now. What do you have in mind? Simon feigned innocence. At some point during the making out, he rolled onto Marcus's lap and was grounding himself by the tip of his toes, both of them trying to keep balance on a single small chair. Our bedroom seems like a perfect place for me to tell you my plans, Marcus said, brushing their noses. Simon smiled. He was too happy to think about anything else. He wanted to combust, and this was the perfect way to go for it. It wasn't as easy to get Sarah out of her job as it was with Linda. The latter usually goes off from work in the beginning of July anyway, as the elementary school she teaches at remains closed throughout the summer. Sarah had to reschedule her vacation period. She prefers to take it around Christmas, and the animal rescuing institute she works as a veterinarian isn't quite the job you get a month off from every time you feel like it. Marcus was the easiest one for obvious motives. Simon had to postpone his dream project of finding a good brand or stylist to start his career with after he'd recently graduated in fashion design, but he reassures himself that it's going to be for a good cause. It's a love trip, his honeymoon, that we're talking about. The group arrived in Italy in time to see the twilight 3 weeks later, under a scalding start of evening. Sarah was in shock with everything airplane-related, and Simon couldn't help but feel the same state of ecstasy. It was all so big and new and fresh and modern that none of them were able to hide that it was the first time the Eriksson siblings were going on a real long trip. Linda, inversely, was handling things way more chilled. 4 years ago, right after divorcing Simon's dad, she and some of her workmates reunited to provide themselves with a weekend trip to a random European country, so she for sure has been on a plane before. Simon never asked where she'd been, though, too wrapped around the fact that his family was finally free from Micke and his mom was living her life. As he remembers that one tiny missing detail, he makes a mental note to try to keep it in mind and question Linda about her rebound trip later. Speaking on Simon's mom, she's currently taking the lead on the four of them alongside Marcus, the two having an inaudible conversation from where Simon stands while leaving the airport. Simon doesn't get it sometimes. How can Marcus barely stand the fact that he wants to keep in touch with his family and then act all normal and welcoming around his mother-in-law when they're in person? Almost like he's being someone he's not. At least not in the majority of time he spends with Simon at home. Simon shrugs, both to relieve tension and to tell his mind that it's a whatever. As long as things are good and calm, he has nothing to worry about. "I hope I won't get bored here," Sarah comments next to Simon, carrying her wheeled suitcase in front of her. "Like, it's a month. I hope there will be enough things to keep us entertained." "There will be," Simon affirms, giving her an honest smile. "And Marcus's parents also made sure we could visit other cities from the area if we ever feel like it." Sarah scrunched her nose, a clear signal of disgust to what Simon left unspoken. "Marcus's parents will pay for whatever we want to," is what he meant. Doesn't it bother him? His sister wonders, also not courageous enough to say it all out loud. Simon doesn't want to tell her he's thought about that too. Even though he's feeling happy and glowing with this trip, he still feels somehow guilty that the most expensive price of the restaurant is going directly, privately, to Marcus, and to Simon himself. It almost feels unfair. Almost. "Do you mind it?" Simon returns with another question. Sarah's eyebrows rise at the same time they stop by the sidewalks, hearing Marcus in front of them say that he's going to get them an Uber to their hotel. "No, I'm here to enjoy. Fuck where the money comes from," she whispers. Simon offers her a soft grin, knowing damn well that she means it only for their mother's sake and his. Even though acting politely, it isn't any news that Sarah overlooks her dislike for Marcus because of her brother's happiness. He could say the same for his friends. Sometimes it feels like everyone and everything is against Simon and Marcus. It's exhausting, really. It's like walking on eggshells around other people, but Simon's got good at it through time. Simon didn't tell Linda it was all supposed to be his pre-crochet honeymoon. He knows she would never have agreed to come with him to another country if it was the case. He also conventionally forgot to mention that it wasn't Marcus or Simon himself who were paying for everything. A honeymoon by itself would get Linda humbling his son down and making him give up on the mere idea of her joining, but if she ever gets to know about who's paying her every breath in the heated air of Florence, it's probable she'd pass away. So Sarah tries her best to give away her discomfort with omissions. Marcus watches his own mouth, aware of every single thing he chats with Linda. And Simon smiles, focusing on the fact that they are all here, now and for the next full month. He's with the people he loves the most in the whole world. It couldn't get any better, and surely won't go down to something worse. This is all he could have asked for. As the night washes the city dark from above and the lampposts come to life, the group find themselves having dinner in the hotel's private restaurant downstairs. Sarah is mesmerized by the variety of food on the menu and the luxurious surroundings, full of plants and with a very comforting low yellow light. Simon is familiarized with all of this, having already spent hours at pretty well-rated places Marcus would take him for dates. And Simon knows Linda is trying to cover up her amazed gaze, but her eyes are sparkling bright at everything she sees. "Ciao, familia. Hai deciso cosa ordinare? A tall, slim figure in a tuxedo pops up, offering the greetings by the end of their table, smiling with an iPad held tight in his right arm. Simon had taken some Italian classes by himself during college, enough to understand that the waiter asked the four if they decided what to order. But before he could reply to the man in his native language, Marcus took the lead and threw his chest slightly over the table, grinning the perfect amount to get the attention. I'm sorry, but could you please address us in English? We don't speak Italian very well, Marcus excuses. Simon restrains the urge to look at his fiancée, something lava-ish growing inside his chest, dangerously close to anger. Why can't he let me? Simon wonders for just a second before forcing his nerves to cool down. It's actually for the best, he thinks a beat later. His mom knows English thanks to him and Sarah, and the siblings are as fluent as Marcus is. There's no motive to be upset about it. His fiancée is considering everyone, making sure all of them can feel included, not only Simon. Oh, certo. I mean, of course. What would you guys like to order? The waiter repeats himself in a heavy accent while turning on his iPad, keen to do his job with a smile that never leaves his face. Their respective plates arrive not so long after by the same waiter who typed down their wishes. They eat with no intentions of rushing, falling into an easy conversation that, surprisingly, Sarah manages to take well despite Marcus's presence. Between comments about how gorgeous and tasteful the food of their hotel is and other small topics that make them all lightheartedly laugh, Simon catches himself portraying this moment in his memories carefully, as if it's one of his model project paintings back in Stockholm. His sister, his mama, the love of his life. The three pillars of Simon's existence coexisting right in front of him, fond of each other. These are the times when Simon says that it all will be worth it in the end. Everything bad can be fixed. Every cracked thing can be put together. The next weeks are coming to prove his point and set foot to a dazzling future. A bit more than an hour later, they're heading back to their rooms. Simon is lost in the interior design of the building, traveling his eyes from the sparkling chandeliers to the carpeted floor. He can see the Ponte Vecchio through the open windows, reflecting itself on the river below, still full with people staring at the stars in the late night. He squeezes Marcus's hand. Hey, we should start touring the city by there tomorrow. Simon points to the bridge with his free hand. The view must be amazing in the morning. Yeah, Marcus sighs, seeming worlds apart from here and now. Simon frowns, stopping walking and turning his head to his fiancée. You want to go somewhere else, honey? It's okay if you do. Marcus even opens his mouth to reply, but he's interrupted by somebody calling him. Dio mio, why did no one warn me the Mogran's heir is here in Firenze already? Ciao, mio amico. They both twist direction to where they exited the elevator, seeing a curly-haired figure getting closer to them, blue eyes evident in the overly formal black clothing he's wearing. Marcus's smirk appears on his lips. Ciao, August! And lets go of Simon's hand, opening his arms when the other man holds his boyfriend in a bro-like hug. It's an honor to have you here. August claps Marcus's shoulder while speaking, no accent visible in his voice. That means he's Swedish too, Simon thinks. The owner's hotel will always be my family's choice. Oh, so August's family is friends with Marcus's. He and Marcus are friends. Marcus himself laughs, and as if finally remembering who he's with, he motions in Simon's direction. Meet my fiancé, August. This is Simon. We're here for our honeymoon, but I suppose you already knew that. Oh, I see. August takes note of Simon's existence and scans him up and down, analyzing something Simon doesn't know. It sends a shiver through his spine. Being judged has never been on the top of his favorite things to feel. Marcus, I'm impressed. He's really well dressed, isn't he? You've got good taste. August half compliments and then grins, looking deep into Simon's eyes. Before Simon could spin his head around what exactly this man meant, he forces out a "thank you," reciprocating the smile. He's graduated in fashion, so he wouldn't be any less, of course, Marcus explains, and then blinks at Simon. The shiver he once felt turns rapidly into flames in his stomach. It's all so good, Marcus, you know, but I'm here to ask something. August clears his throat. I was supposed to approach you when you guys were having dinner, but I was really busy, so I was thinking if you've got some time to come with me for a while. We still have some matters to discuss about this trip. It's all already your parents' acknowledgement. I only need to inform you now. Marcus presents little to no hesitation when saying, "Of course, let's go," and grabbing Simon by his waist, kissing him passionately, though way too fast. "I'll be right back, Wait for me in our room, love," he demands. And Simon can only nod, not even getting the chance to ask if he could join the two, question what it meant to have trip matters still up to be discussed, or the fact that Marcus didn't say where he would be at. As August takes his fiancée back into the elevator, all loud conversations and laughter, Simon stands still for a couple seconds, dizzy by a sudden lonely feeling. "Cariño?" A tender voice reaches his ears, and a kind hand touches Simon by the shoulder, waking him up from his quick inertia. "Hey, mi amor, what are you doing out of your room?" "Hi, Mom." His voice comes out strangled. "Is everything okay?" Simon doesn't think he's capable of thinking through what's needed to truly answer this. His mother carries so much safety in her tone, truly worried for whatever is going on. She enters his field of vision, and Simon simply starts shaking. What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? "Where's Marcus? Did something happen to him? I thought he and you... Oh." She gasps as Simon wraps his arms around his mama, so tight that an inch more he moves closer and they will become one. His head makes a home on the crook of Linda's neck, snorting her typical lavender scent. Simon closes his eyes, melting even more when her arms hold him by his waist. "Te extraño mucho, mama," Simon whispers as though it's a secret, petting her upper arm currently covered by a beautiful navy blue dress. "I'm so happy you and Sarah are here with me." It's silent for a beat. Simon bets his mother is pondering between asking what's wrong or just letting it go and allow her son to have this moment. The choice goes to the latter, he thinks, because Linda sighed profoundly before saying, "I missed you too, mi hijo." The first day in Florence is, ironically, Monday. Marcus made it quick to dismiss Simon's attempts to get a map guide for the city and run to some tourist-famous spots such as Ponte Vecchio, as he mentioned yesterday. His fiancée smiled, saying to Simon that he knew a way better place for them to spend their start of honeymoon. Simon also hasn't said a thing about what happened the day before. When Marcus came to their hotel room about 2 hours later, he only managed to ask if everything was okay, unable to impose himself. Marcus said yes, avoiding details, and kissed him until, magically, all their clothes were off and they'd become a mess of skin and heat on the bed. Linda and Sarah seemed to have formed their own schedule when they all went to grab breakfast in the buffet earlier in the morning. His mum said they could all join in a mutual activity by the weekends, so the rest of the days were free to be Marcus and Simon's private paradise, in her words. Simon felt both relieved and apprehensive by this idea. He was sure Sarah had already pointed out all of the famed places and was eager to go visit them, and Simon envied that. At the same time, he was willing to know what his future husband had prepared for them today. And that was when the couple ended up inside of a massive closed building in downtown. Marcus was all jumpy and giddy while guiding Simon with a hand by the end of his spine through several wooden tables, smelling something salty and full of flavoring in the air. "You've got to be kidding me," Simon thought. "A fucking restaurant?" They made their way to the kitchen, where they found a single woman in a several white chef's uniform, stirring a huge cauldron with a dense tomato soup. At least, tomato is what it looks like. "Hey, Mr. Mogren," she grinned, as whitey as her clothes. "So glad you came." She continued and dropped the spoon in the sauce, cleaning her hands in her apron and coming in their direction. "And you brought with you..." "My fiancé," Marcus explains politely, wandering his hands until he was holding Simon by the waist. "Oh, certo! You both look amazing together." She smirked, offering her hand to Simon. "It's a pleasure to meet you too, Simon," he finishes the woman's sentence, shaking her hand. What is even happening? His brain couldn't stop asking. Marcus must have understood the quizzical gaze Simon was firing him under and tried to sum the situation up by saying, "She's one of my parents' old networks and closest friends. She rules this place. She's a top-tier chef, really. I just wanted to spend the day learning some tips and watching her cooking for when the restaurant opens. Simon tried not to freak out about the spent the day case, and instead murmured in the calmest manner he could. You know, Marcus, you could have told me you wanted to visit here, so we could find time to have some fun outside too, and... But this is fun too. I'm not saying it isn't, Simon reassures, even though he doesn't quite mean it. I was just thinking we should plan our days together next time, yeah? No need to hide what you want from me, okay? Marcus gazed at him, still with his fingers dancing onto Simon's waist. And Simon waited. Waited for anything. Some bigger response, silence, a dry followed by nothingness. He expected the worst, so it was some sort of surprise when Marcus sighed. I'm sorry, Sima. Sure, let's do this. We're in this together. And brightened his expression with a brief grin. Simon, on the other hand, proceeded to keep smiling strong. When the hours kept passing away and he was chatting in faint excitement with a chef he found out was called Akta, he smiled. When she handed him some of her food to try out, he smiled and said it was the most delicious thing he's ever eaten. When the night inevitably came again, and they had dinner in the same now crowded restaurant they've been at for the past 12 hours, he smiled. Because he knew things would be different the next day. He did tell Marcus what he was thinking, what he wants for them both. He knows his fiancé will take his words into consideration, and it kept him smiling all the way back to the Ornis Hotel. The story repeated itself on Tuesday. They in fact did visit Ponte Vecchio when the sun was setting down, which got Simon out of his breath and taking various pictures of this magical moment. But the prior hours were like torture. Marcus insisted they should visit one of the wineries in the countryside, which took them 2 hours inside an Uber to get there. And it was like living hell on earth to Simon. The hot weather, his discomfort, and the way Marcus wasn't even paying attention to the fact that his fiancé was absolutely detesting everything were all about to drive Simon mad crazy. And it just got worse when the owner, at this point Simon shouldn't be surprised he's one of the Mogren's allies in the cuisine universe, an old man with more numbers and age than hair on his head, offered Simon a sip of his greatest and oldest wine from the barrels. I don't drink alcohol, Simon had to say, controlling his anger. It must have come out rude nonetheless, as the practically bald man widened his eyes and stepped out of Simon's way. Marcus mildly looked at him, equally bemused, but didn't ask what was wrong. Simon also didn't want him to. Now, though, the tables had turned. Simon was happily taking pics on his phone, supported by the bridge's parapet and being sunset washed in gold, meanwhile having a grumpy and annoyed Marcus by his side. And if Simon's being honest, he couldn't care less about Marcus's mood right now. By the end of the third day, Simon had had enough. He decided that he can and will be the one to ruin the mood. Marcus was pissed off by the fact that Simon refused to accompany him to some kind of cheese house. After a lot of insistence and winning Simon by exhaustion, he still complained that, "Sima, love, why'd you come if you wouldn't enjoy it here?" The situation had put a fate on Simon's day right there. Any entertainment they could have possibly got afterwards was over. Once they set foot in their room around 3 p.m., Simon lost it. He was done, anger bubbling with the lack of Marcus's tact. And not even only this, but the fact that he simply wasn't telling Simon where they were going in advance. Marcus was hiding himself behind the premise that it would be a surprise appointment. Simon started hating surprises from that couple days on. So they fought. There was no screaming, not so much altered nerves, but harsh words that could be easily in the fine line between offensive and still reversible, and the undertone was making the atmosphere thick inside the wealth suit. Simon was all about telling Marcus how upset he was and his dislike for what their supposed honeymoon is currently becoming. Marcus was all about accusing Simon of not seeing things by his perspective, unable to be enthusiastic about anything he proposes. Simon got tired at some point. He'd sat by the end of their bed, looking at the perfectly built stone wall and getting lost in it. Marcus was mid-argument when he realized it was already over for Simon. After a beat of silence, the only sound heard being the busy streets below and someone yelling in Italian here and there, Marcus took a real deep inhale and tried. Look, love, why don't we get some time apart then? Not in our relationship, obviously, Marcus explained rather fast. But until the end of the week, like, physically. Then we can have this conversation again, yes? Simon took long to reply. He was sweating. All his body was covered by heat, his heart a mess between disappointment and irritation. But in the end, he just nodded, not really capable of arguing against it, and, yeah, sometimes should do us good. Marcus said some more things Simon didn't process and gave him a mechanic kiss on his temple. And then his fiancée was gone. Gone until the day had finished, when he finally slid under the blankets and respected Simon's space, drifting off at an arm-length distance. But Simon stayed awake that night, trying to figure out the bitter feeling all of this had brought into him. He came to the conclusion that maybe, only maybe, he'd got this vacation's purpose wrong, and it can't be a good signal. On Thursday, Simon had an epiphany. He had definitely seen the things for what they are now. This vacation, at first, was meant to be a prize for someone else. Someone who obviously works with Marcus's parents. Of course it's supposed to be fun and unforgettable, but tell me, since when do employers give something to their workers for absolute free will and light heart? Even though they're good people, they can still move the pieces around, aiming for more of what they want. And what do rich people crave the most? Money, Simon's brain screams. And he laughs until his belly is hurting and his mind is convinced that it's all so fucking funny. This is a business trip disguised as a vacation, you dump. The unlucky people who could have won the prize instead of Marcus would be forced to attend all of these places to do their job better when back in Stockholm. And then their son got drawn, and it all went simply even more perfect. He couldn't stand spending the day in the Ornes hotel anymore. No, not when Marcus was out of sight already, having sneaked out their suit very early in the morning without saying a word. Not when the sun was shining high already, inviting Simon for a good and old touristing around his own to forget about his resentment. He could ask Sarah and his mom if he could join them in their day, but he had already spent the rest of the noon with the girls yesterday, justifying his presence by making up some emergency meeting Marcus had to attend with August. So Simon wore one of his favorite yet simple outfits, shorts with a white tank top and his pair of black and white Air Forces. He styled his curls in front of the mirror carefully, applying some sunscreen on his face, putting his sunglasses on at last. He looked great. He looked awesome. Simon pocketed his wallet and got out of the room, praying his mom and sister would be out already and wouldn't see him leaving the building alone. He grabbed some sandwich for breakfast at the hotel's buffet and ate it while exiting Ornes. He used his phone to guide himself through the town, searching on Google for some interesting places that seemed worth a visit. Until it was time for lunch, Simon walked in the Piazza del Duomo, taking pics and getting lost in the stores circling the urban square. He sat by a sidewalk empty table after midday, hands full of bags containing souvenirs and some new clothes, or even things he found cute to decorate his apartment back in Stockholm. After ordering something for lunch and proudly speaking Italian to the waiter while doing so, he turned the attention back to his phone, swiping through the photos he had taken. Smiling, he chose one of the many to send to his friends. Simon? Prettiest place I've ever been, honestly. Got some souvenirs for you guys. Ayub? OMG, at Rush, he's alive. Rush? Simon Eriksson, I swear to God, if you spend 4 whole days without chatting with us again, I'll be coming for you with no mercy. Get yourself warned. But wow, this is amazing. Ayub? Agreed. Both about the pig and kidnapping Simon, I mean. Rush? I literally didn't say a thing about kidnapping him. Simon? What else did you mean by coming for me then? Ayub? It was kidnapping indeed. Rush? Kay, no need to hide anymore. I want to make him suffer bad for ignoring us all this time. Simon? I'm sorry, guys. Really. It's been a while since we got here. I ain't got much time. Rush? Understandable. I forgive you. But I want updates, though. How's your honeymoon going? Are you and Marcus at this place right now? It's so beautiful. Ayub? For real, that looks breathtaking. wishing I had a rich partner too right now. Simon wandered his thumbs over the keyboard, thinking about what to reply. He could just lie and say, yes, Marcus is here with him, they're having the time of their lives. Or he could tell the truth and hear his best friend shit-talking his fiancée for at least 2 weeks and being recommended with a dramatic breakup, knowing Rush and Ayoub well as he does. None of these options seemed nice in Simon's view. Simon? Yep, it's all been surreal so far. There's a lot I want to do here still. Ayoub? Keep us on track, please, so I can envy you a little more. Rush? Ayoub just wants to switch places and go on a romantic road trip at this point. Ayoub? Kinda, since I've been single and miserable for 22 years nonstop now. Rush? You're so dramatic. Ayoub? Of course you'd say that, you have the best girlfriend in the world. Rush? You're dramatic and absolutely right. Keep us updated, Simma. Love and miss you. Ayoub? Miss you too, bro. Hoping the souvenirs you bought us are cute and stuff. Simon? Lol, they do are. Y'all gonna like them. Love and miss you too, guys. Always. Simon couldn't help but feel kind of guilty for hiding that one tiny, very tiny detail from his friends, but he feels like it's not the time to talk about his relationship worries yet. Maybe when it's all good again, he promises himself. After eating and leaving Piazza del Duomo behind, he headed to a small medieval church near the area to really dive into the old times. The paintings and architecture were insane, it all so well preserved that Simon caught himself thinking about the laborness people who keep these kind of historical buildings have. It must be real hard and full of careful handiwork. A bit before the sun pointed to the west, Simon told himself he could find his way back to the hotel on his phone's GPS, and that it was okay to just walk by a little. He let himself be enveloped by the humblest places of Florence, looking around to friendly neighborhoods and narrow cobbled streets. The random moments he's captured were so domestic and routine-like that he couldn't stop smiling. A woman on the 3rd floor of a house hanging the family's clothes on the balcony, some kids playing football here and there, warm conversations between people filling his ears, cars with slow drivers passing by. For some brief moments, Simon came to the conclusion that he'd like to live like this someday. Living in a touristic town and getting used to it, able to enjoy one of the most beautiful corners of the world every time he feels like it. The people here seem to be so happy, so at peace. Simon craves that. After some minutes of rambling and getting lost in the Italian air, something caught his attention. A few meters forward, there was a small crowd next to a street corner, all looking at something in the wall in front of them. Without thinking too much, Simon drove his feet to get there, moved by curiosity and the increasing sense of discovery that's been with him all day. He couldn't keep his bemused demeanor to himself once he was there with the other people and what he discovered being a dead-end street. There were some benches spread around where majorly women were sitting on and handwriting something on paper. The benches were positioned to face the wall to the right that was fully covered by letters? Simon went further into the compact sea of people, trying to take a better look. There weren't a lot of letters, but it for sure was a considerable ton of them. Some were wide open, others were closed, a variety of colors and forms pinned to the brick wall. The sun was turning gold already, and the wind finally came into sight, making all of the papers rustle against each other. A woman with a loose blonde braid had just left the wall and was heading back to the open street, and Simon thought it was the perfect chance to ask, "Hey, mi scusi, what is all of this?" The woman got slightly scared by the sudden approach, but relaxed her expression and opened a smile. "Haven't you heard about Romeo's wall?" she said back in Italian. "No?" It came out as a question rather than a statement. "That's okay, this one's not really much known yet," she explains, shrugging. "I thought it was a thing in Verona only," Simon babbled, mind going to his brief knowledge of Italy and something about their Juliet's secretaries answering to the pressing love letters left on a famous wall. The blonde smirk just got larger. "Yep, but that one you just said is for Juliet only, and it's been faithful to the Romeo and Juliet Shakespeare romance for decades now. Our wall is a bit newer. It started only a few years ago." She motions to her bag where the letters stand. And no one knows who answers to them, if it's a single person or a whole crew like Juliet. Romeo can be any and every one of Florence, really. I think that's the actual magic behind it all. Simon took a second to absorb the information and, especially, what it was insinuating inside of him. Even though he's been acting all put together and mature, his recent situation with Marcus hurts. After chatting with his Bierstadt friends and not being able to open up to them, he wishes now he did at least something to get proper advice. Literally anything that could help him and his fiancée. Advice? The said Romeo gives love advice to people, right? He gazed at the letters, and then at the woman, who seemed to know exactly what was going on in his mind. "Would you have any paper and a pen, perhaps?" he asks, feeling like a desperate teenager again who couldn't solve the minor of his life issues. But the woman was all about understanding. She unzipped her bag and handed Simon a piece of paper big enough from her notebook and a blue pen. "I heard Romeo's responses are really good and helpful, so go ahead," she said. And Simon did. He let go of his bags and sat by the cobblestone ground in front of one of the wooden benches, putting the paper on the seat in order to have a flat surface to write on. Well, at least Simon tried to write something. As time passed and his surroundings had become emptier, the shadows of the tall houses washing the streets, and the sun setting making the sky look ethereal in orange, pink, and blue, Simon stood almost like a statue, pen wandering over the paper the sympathetic woman gifted him without a single word being written on it. His mind went blank. At some point, his incapacity to put out what he was feeling got him angry. He huffed, trying to control his nerves and close his eyes for a beat, inhaling deep. Why can't I? Why can't I? Why can't I? You know you can return tomorrow if you're having trouble expressing your feelings, right? The sudden voice made him jump on his feet, dropping the pen and getting up as fast as he'd ever managed to. The alley was scarce of people, unless for a man with brown hair in a wheelchair, rolling himself to get closer not to Simon but to the wall. The Romeo's wall. He tripped over the words, calming his racing heart in the meantime. "Who are you?" he asked, forcing his best Italian out. The man grinned, though not looking at Simon. He had a basket on his lap, and when he reached out his arm to grab one of the lower-level letters, that was where he dropped it. Simon frowned. "You collect the letters," Simon half murmured his conclusion. It was still audible, though, so the man heard him perfectly. "Touché," and proceeded to grab a bunch more of them, sliding on the wheels. "And today these folks put them a little too high here. Could you help me with them, please? I'm tired of warning everyone about the maximum hate they can pin them." Simon hesitated a bit, but abandoned his not-even-started letter and went to help the man. They worked in silence for a couple minutes, collecting the letters both pinned high and low. When they were about to finish, something occurred to Simon's mind. "You said you warned people about the pinning conditions." The man's neck turned towards Simon at this moment. "I thought it was all a secret." The other smiled warmingly. "Yes, it's a secret. Who writes back, I mean. The lovesick ones who find this place and for some reason come back are full of seeing my face already." He laughs, motioning for Simon to give him the letters he had collected. "I obviously know the entity behind this Romeo idea, though." Simon put the letters in the man's basket. "I didn't know that." "You would if you were from around Florence, which I assume you aren't." He maneuvered the wheelchair so he'd be facing Simon body to body. "I'm from Sweden," Simon says. The brown eyes from the stranger got sparkling. "Nej! What brings you to Italy, man?" He continues in his mother tongue. The familiarity of the Swedish language puts a smile on Simon's lips. "I'm on my honeymoon." And then his tender expression disappears. He had forgotten about everything for a split of minutes, fully focused on helping the wheelchair man to do his job. The man stopped himself before he could say what was for sure an excited congratulations after seeing Simon's drop of mood. He shuffled on his seat, clearly more uncomfortable. "Having trouble in paradise, huh?" "Yeah, kinda," Simon replied dryly. The man eyed him for what seemed an eternity of seconds, before sighing and complimenting him with a shrug. "Well, I'll keep my word. You can return tomorrow if you still want to leave a letter. This is usually the time I come to collect them, so any time sooner than now you'll be welcome," and returns a fragile smile to Simon. "Sure. Okay." The man was about to leave, wheeling his wheelchair back to the alley entrance, when he suddenly turned back to face Simon. "Oh, and please don't forget to put your current address on the letter so Romeo can make sure the replies makes its way to you." He grins. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Simon," the brown-skinned answers, the corner of his lips mildly upping. "Nice to meet you, Simon. I'm Erik." And then Erik was gone. Simon remained in the dead-end street, watching the now empty Romeo's wall as the night came to life in Florence, bringing shadows to both out and inside of Simon's body. This was Chapter 1 of Letters to Romeo by Willeseas on AO3. You can find the link of the fanfiction in the video description. If there's any fanfiction you want me to read, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and have a great day.